Good evening. My name is Matthew Ogden. You're watching the LaRouche Pack webcast for Friday, February 28th, 2014, the final day in February. You're tuning in on a very momentous evening. The news is probably already spreading that no more than 2 hours ago, Obama was forced to expose himself as a liar, an impeachable liar, at a event of the Democratic National Committee in Washington, D.C. When Obama was confronted by a member of the audience and asked to tell us about your plan for nuclear war with Russia, Obama responded by saying, "I'm sorry, but what the heck are you talking about? I don't know anything about that plan. I don't know what you've been reading." Now, no more than 45 minutes before Obama made these remarks at the DNC, he delivered a press conference at the White House in which he said that there will be war with Russia if Russia makes a move in Ukraine. He said any violation of Ukraine's sovereignty and territorial integrity would be deeply destabilizing. Quote, "There will be costs for any military intervention in Ukraine." So, in fact, Obama did threaten war with Russia, and no more than 45 minutes later was forced to deny that very fact after the world had already heard what he had to say. Now, I want to invite Lynn to begin this webcast by putting his own remarks on this matter.
Earlier this month, I instructed my associates to make a countdown calendar for the day approximately when the war would start. And I had said plus or minus the 1st of March. And the Ides of March seemed to it as an ironical touch in this whole business for Caesar. And it turned out to be a much bigger Caesar boo-boo than I had thought. Because just one of our members who intervened on the president and asked him to respond on his plan for thermonuclear war, he denied he'd had the plan, and 45 minutes ago, he'd given it to the international press. So Obama has now totally discredited himself. And what he's also done, he's done the one thing that the idiots in the United States refuse to consider. They had always said, "You're wrong. He's not going to do this. He's not going to do that." He said before, "What are you talking about? There's going to be a war. Who says I'm going to make a war?" In other words, the man is a liar. Now, on the other part of this thing is all of this story is now in the international press. That's interesting. What's more interesting is my forecasting. Some of us know that I've been kind of doing a countdown calendar by names of Rabelaisian and Shakespearean figures. And I had March 1st, tomorrow morning, as the probable, not certain, but probable crucial point when Obama will go down. It looks very much like on this tomorrow, even maybe tonight, who knows? Tomorrow marks the day I forecast as the most likely day that he would be kicked out of the presidency. Now, what I've been doing in this respect is a principle of strategy. Now, most people don't know what the word strategy means, but they often use it without knowing what it means. Strategy is a far different concept than a simple military offense. Strategy is a way in which points in history are to be changed. And I told people, I said, this is the mark. Either at the end of February or the beginning of March is the period in which this president will go for thermonuclear war globally. Now, the importance of this is the idiots of the United States, the weaklings, the cowards, will all say, oh, it never will happen. It won't happen. They won't do it. It won't happen. Every time I give a forecast about what the economy is going to do in a major way, I've always said that, and they always said, no, it never happened. That's not. You can't forecast the future. Well, I forecast the future. I said March 1st is the day that this guy should be thrown out of office. And he just did. On the day before March 1st, he practically threw himself out of office. Because when you tell the American people out there that the president intends behind their back to go into a thermonuclear war, when a thermonuclear war means when you involve Russia and the United States, that's all of Europe also goes in. You're involving China, you're involving India, you're involving other parts of the planet. Do you know what you do if you start that kind of war? You exterminate the human population. And those people who are not dead within the first hour and a half of thermonuclear war will be dying. The ones who are dead will be lucky, because the kind of death they'll go through in the aftermath of a thermonuclear war, full scale, nobody will be left alive for very long. And that's what Obama, working for the British monarchy, who set this up. Obama was just a stooge for the British monarchy. He always has been. Like George W. Bush Jr. He couldn't find his way around the room, let alone a thing. So we've got to the point where the issue is out. Any American who doesn't want to die is going to push Obama out of office now. Because what he's done today, the threat of thermonuclear war confronting the entire American population, and the leading press throughout the world has the story right now. Do you think he can be still in office on Monday? The day after March, 2 days after March 1st? Sometimes, in a moment, history speaks to you.
Now, I want to ask a question about another part of Obama's nemesis. As most people in Washington probably had on their minds when they were listening to Obama speak at the Democratic National Committee meeting today, Keisha Rogers' campaign in Texas, running for the United States Senate, is probably not the subject of very pleasant dinner talk over the Obama dinner table at the White House these days. There's been a huge freakout among the Obama wing of the Democratic Party following the publication of a poll in the University of Texas Tribune poll that Keisha Rogers, candidate for the United States Senate in Texas, polling at 35%, puts her well ahead of all of the other candidates in the primary in Texas, making her the clear front runner going into the primaries next Tuesday. The Democratic leadership in Texas are desperately trying to label Keisha as not a Democrat, when she's clearly far more qualified as a candidate than any of the other candidates in the race, having well established her track record among Democratic voters by winning 2 previous Democratic primary campaigns for the U.S. Congress in Texas, all the while calling for the impeachment of Barack Obama. The party organization has gone so far as to make their members sign loyalty oaths to Barack Obama in an attempt to exclude Keisha Rogers from the party. And the media is going into overdrive to try to derail her campaign in the desperate last days. So it's clear that Keisha is provoking severe consternation within the Democratic Party establishment, even while she gains increasing traction among the rank-and-file voters, the Democrats on the ground in the state of Texas. So, question is, how do you see the strategic significance of the impact which the Rogers campaign is having and has already had, even before the voters go to the polls next Tuesday?
Well, Tuesday's going to be very interesting for these polls because as of Tuesday, as of tomorrow, and even tonight for those who are watching the relevant news coverage, know that Obama said he's carrying them to death. He's carrying them to thermonuclear war. And the only reason that they were able to hold the people of this nation in Obama's grip was they were afraid that Obama was going to get them in trouble or that Obama would do something bad to them. And therefore they decided to be timid. Now everybody who wants to live through the coming several days, knowing that Obama has talked about an immediate nuclear war with Russia, and a nuclear war with Russia means immediately a worldwide thermonuclear conflict set off simultaneously. Because it's been discussed before who is going to do the first hit in thermonuclear war. And the conclusion was there was no possible way that you could sit back and take the second strike. The idea that you would take a second strike and then come back and crush your adversary is nonsense. They figured that one out. You can't do it. Which means that all of the nations involved, including China and so forth, are all now on the verge of a joint thermonuclear war throughout the planet. That's the reality. Now the people out there in the United States who've been getting the news reports which show that Obama went out in front of his own press, went out without telling the members of the Democratic Party. He didn't tell the Democratic Party members. He told only this other group, which he thought was under his control. He thought the Democratic Party was going to do with like the Yulin business, where she lied, this fascist bitch lied. I can use these terms now because that's what the American people are thinking about this kind of crap. They're thinking that this president is evil, and he must be thrown out of office now. And you have the public press which has reported on the fact of these two incidents. The incidents we had in the Democratic Party, but what happened before, 3/4 of an hour before. He had said then what he was going to do, and he denied it when he was challenged in the Democratic Party office. Why? Because he was afraid the Democrats would reject him if they thought he was going to get them in a war. That's why he lied. But he was caught lying. He was caught on the press before this happened. He was caught by the press after this happened. I think Obama is not long for this presidency, because the American people, knowing they're being put into a thermonuclear war in which they can be wiped out, ain't likely to want that president in office any longer. So that's the way history sometimes works. And the way this worked is because we were on the ball, we were pressing the issues, we were creating pressure on the fact that this was headed to thermonuclear war. And I was right, and the president was a liar, an evil liar, an evil man who's unfit for office in any nation, in any part of the world. He probably belongs in prison. And will insist on he track down his co-conspirators and check them out too. But this was actually the British monarchy's intention. And that's a more complicated story, which we can go into another time. But this is the nature of reality. And reality has suddenly struck all the sentient members of the U.S. population in terms of less than 1 hour interval. This. And sometimes if you press the issues hard, you induce the enemy to make a great mistake. And Obama is now, as of tonight, clearly known by an increasing number of American citizens that he is the enemy of the people of the United States. and therefore must be ushered from office immediately.
Now, one of the other things that the people of the United States are suffering right now is a historic drought, which may be beyond anything that this country has seen in half a millennium, in 500 years. And this is in the southwestern United States, in the area west of the Mississippi, between Texas and California. And earlier this week, Mr. LaRouche has made a major point of saying that the amplification of Keisha Rogers' campaign in the state of Texas, in combination with the recently declared campaign of Michael Steagall in California to run for Congress in the San Francisco area, must be combined in order to encompass this entire region of the southwest of the United States, which is now suffering this historic drought. So I have the honor of being joined in the studio today by Michael Steagall, and I would like to invite him to the podium to pose some of the circumstances and raise some relevant questions.
Good evening. So, Lynn, over the course of the last week, you've laid out 3 points, and which you emphasized again last night. One was the threat of thermonuclear war in Ukraine. That's the first point. The second was the question of impeachment of Obama, which has clearly taken on a turn tonight. And the third, as a single point of a broader strategic outlook, was the role of Texas and California, specifically to break the current control of Congress in Washington, D.C. under this Obama dictatorship, and the general block on what's really occurring, which is if you can suspend the crisis around Ukraine and begin to look at the situation among the American people, you see truly mass suffering. You see poverty levels skyrocketing. You see areas specifically in California where the drought has become so severe. Places like Fresno or Bakersfield, cities that were once part of a critical agricultural process in the United States, now some of the poorest cities in the country. People are finding it difficult even to ride public transit. And so what you see occurring is a kind of devastation that clearly requires the immediate actions of Congress. So what I'd like you to do, if you can, which is in one case for obvious reasons, given my campaign in San Francisco and my colleague's campaign, Keisha Rogers, for U.S. Senate, is to address the role of Texas and California, but from this higher strategic factor. And how this indicates this quality of relationship between the threat of war in Ukraine, the situation in Washington under the tyranny of Obama, and the question of California and Texas indicate a higher way of thinking about political strategy. That would be useful.
Well, we have two issues, and they're intermixed, actually. One is the question of thermonuclear war. That's there. But the other side, the complement, the two things are this and the drought, the great drought. Now, what we're dealing with is I won't go through the scientific details. Some of our associates and others have been discussing these details. But I think let's give the general picture of what the overall situation is. It is obvious that for an extended period of time, that the western part of the United States, and this has not just started yesterday, this has been going on for several years, that the water supplies available in west of the Mississippi and south of the Canadian border, this whole area is going to a period of death. Under present conditions, from this season on, there will be virtually no significant crop harvest for people living in that area. Now, it's not only the harvest for there, but much in the eastern part, east of the Mississippi, is also going to be in trouble because there's not going to be enough food in the United States as a whole to feed the American people. And this is what the Obama and preceding administrations have done to the United States. In point of fact, there's been big talk about a lot of money out there, but it's not real. It's Wall Street. It's Wall Street speculation. Bail out, bail in. And there has been no net growth in per capita income of the people of the United States since the assassination of John F. Kennedy. There has been an increase of money, but not of wealth. There has been a great inflation. The inflation took off with the involvement of the United States right after the assassination of Kennedy. And that was the opening of the war in Indochina, which lasted for about 10 years, a decade or so. We lost about 80, 90,000 of our people dead in fighting that useless war, which we should have never gotten into. And if Obama had not, if he had not been assassinated, then we would never have the problem. He was on a program of water building, nuclear power, space exploration. He launched it all. He was one of the greatest presidents we ever had, especially if his life had not been shut off so suddenly by an assassination, and it was an inside job inside the United States, like many other assassinations of presidents which have occurred in the United States earlier. And then his brother, who was about to be elected to Congress, to presidency, Robert Kennedy, they assassinated him too. And then about a dozen years later, they tried to assassinate Ronald Reagan, President Ronald Reagan. So we have a succession of the attempt to manipulate the policies of the United States by shooting presidents. And these were all set-up jobs. And the setup against Bill Clinton was another set-up job. It wasn't exactly a bloody assassination, but it was certainly a personal assassination of the first order of magnitude. And it's only that operation, that fraud, run by the right wing in the United States against Bill Clinton, setting him up, was the way they got in George W. Bush Jr., who doesn't think at all to speak of, never did. His drug problems would wore away a lot of his mental capabilities. Then we got Obama. Obama was not really the president of the United States. He was a stooge put in by British drug pushing interests. So we have been destroyed step by step. First of all, to what happened with John F. Kennedy, his assassination. Then the assassination of his brother, who would have been a great president too. But they assassinated him to prevent him from becoming president. Then we had the assassination attack on President Reagan. He was largely incapacitated for a period of time as a result. And some of the plans I had together with him in his circle at the beginning of the 1980s and the end of the 1970s, those plans were disturbed by the assassination attack on President Reagan. Then we had Bill Clinton, and Bill Clinton had a terrible and evil vice president. As a matter of fact, he was a president of vice more than a vice president. He still is a man of vice. So we've lost the ability to maintain the United States in our tradition because of these assassinations and other kinds of things that went with them. An alien force from London with the Bush family. I mean the Bush family, Prescott Bush, who was the guy who put Hitler into power in Germany. And did it as a project of Wall Street. That's one of these cases. We have similar other cases. So the United States has been victimized repeatedly by assassinations of our best presidents. They don't kill our bad presidents. They kill only our good ones. The bad ones are encouraged to live longer. So what we have had a loss of what we as the United States are. We have a green policy which is killing our people. There will be, as a result of the green policy, there will be no food to speak of for the population of the United States in general, already. We're going to have to require of ourselves emergency programs, which have to be based largely on high technology, the elimination of fracking inside the United States, shut down the British fracking inside the United States, save the crops that we can, build in water systems. It means that we're going to have to say no more nuclear war, no thermonuclear war, but we're going to have nuclear power. Because without the aid of nuclear power now, this nation will not be able to maintain the size of population we have today. And it was the intention of the British monarchy to reduce our population, to reduce the population of the whole planet from 7 billion people to the Queen's own designation of less than 1 billion people. The green policy has been a deliberate policy radiated from Britain to cause mass death rates in the United States, to reduce the world population from 7 billion people to less than 1. And that was the policy, the official policy of the Queen and of the green policy. What we're going to have to do is this. We cannot continue, we cannot live under these circumstances with the green policy. The green policy must come to an end. Because the only way in which we can cope with the threat of mass death now, caused by this drought, which will go on for several decades, is the best estimate. It's not going to go away soon. We're going to have to use forceful methods to enable ourselves and our people to have the food to eat. We're going to have to engage in large-scale water projects. There's not enough water in the western states of the United States to keep the present U.S. population alive. And the only way we can do that is with thermonuclear power augmentation. We're going to have to build the LaRouche's system, and that's going to take some time to do that. We have it designed already. The LaRouche's system is fully designed. And if we shut off the flow of water out of northern Alaska region in northern Canada, we can turn the fresh water, which is now being spilled into the Pacific Ocean, and make it wait a while before it goes into this ocean again. Move it across this area of the Alaska-Canadian area. Move that water down through into the west coast of the United States and into the internal parts of the United States on the west the Mississippi River. We can do that, but it's going to require a massive mobilization. We're going to have to cancel the existence of Wall Street, because the great fake out of debt, Wall Street, we're going to have to put Glass-Steagall immediately into action. By Glass-Steagall, we will essentially bankrupt Wall Street. We'll bankrupt the whole crew. But they didn't earn any money anyway. They just stole it by muscular methods. So we're going to have to take those measures. Otherwise, the plain fact is, this nation and its people cannot continue to live unless we are able to take those measures, which means the big thing is water. Water. And you cannot get the water to work for you unless you have the thermonuclear power and nuclear power to do it with. But if we use those resources, we can actually find the water by better management in these parts of the United States. That's a big thing. We're wasting a lot of water. So now we can't waste it anymore. We've got to manage it. We've got to purify it more often. And that's going to cost something in terms of energy effort. And we're going to have, above all, we're going to have to restore the people who are discouraged people in the United States. And we're going to have to restore their confidence that they're going someplace. They will put up with a lot if they have to. If they know they're not being cheated, if they know that the work is being done for them. Because Americans before has always understood that they would give up a little bit to make their future possible, make the future of their family possible. So that's what we have to do. We have to have a sudden change in policy. We have to actually prevent any idea of thermonuclear war on this planet. No one in Asia wants to organize a thermonuclear war. Japan has some problems on some of its people. They've got crazy ideas around Tokyo. That's true. But China is, a powerful nation, much more powerful than Japan. India is 1.1 billion people. China about 1.4 billion people. That's not chickens. Huh? And therefore, they don't want the war. They want space. They want thermonuclear power. Europe is crushed by the British Empire. The nations of continental Europe are slaves of the British Empire. They have no sovereignty. There's no nation of sovereignty in that system. No nation has sovereignty. Greece has no sovereignty. If they try to call for sovereignty, they're fined heavily as a nation. We have an evil situation on this planet. But we are in a situation where we in the United States, if we take our role, we prevent, if the United States doesn't go to thermonuclear war, nobody can go to thermonuclear war. If we throw this president out of office and we have a presidency which is not his office, not his cronies, not Wall Street, we'll bankrupt Wall Street because they didn't earn anything. They don't owe anything. They don't own it. They just stole it or faked it or make fake money. Wall Street money, monopoly money. So we are going to have to make some changes. The change is this. We've come to the end of war. We may have police actions and so forth, to keep the peace within and among nations. That's one thing. But there's no room for war among the nations of the planet now. Any major war or set of wars which are going to occur would be thermonuclear wars. And no one can outlive a thermonuclear war. Warfare has just become no longer tolerable for anyone. There can be police actions. We have to clean up some messes, and this may require some enforcement of police action for legitimate reasons. But mankind is now going to have to reorganize itself, and we in the United States have a very special mission. We are the best qualified keystone nation to help reorganize the world. That doesn't mean we're going to run the world. It means we're going to help reorganize it. And that's what we have to do. The time has come to do that, to reverse the errors, the follies, the foolishness which the world has gone through since even World War II. Do that now. But this means that we're going to have to go to a completely high technology program. Eliminate all this frou-frou, all this green policy. We're going to go out to the moon. We're not going to live there. We're going to go up there to collect thermonuclear fusion power, helium-3. By taking that helium-3, which is bountifully provided by the moon now as a storage center, and move that down into Earth and open up with thermonuclear fusion programs, we will have the access within 1 or 2 decades, depending how we do it. We will to solve all these major problems that we face now in our own country and other people face in other countries. We can no longer have war. I say police action will be probably inevitable, considering that all the Nazis and so forth still running loose as in Ukraine. And Obama, he'll be removed from office. That Nazi will go too. And that's the way it is. We have a tough job. We haven't done anything about it really yet for a long time. Not since Jack Kennedy was assassinated and his brother. I know Ronald Reagan tried to do well, but he got assassinated too. He just happened to live over it. The others didn't. And he was eliminated because they wanted him out, because they wanted the Bush League presidents, not real presidents. And so that's the issue. We have to tell the people, the United States, who tonight will begin to know what the truth has been about the Bush administrations and the Obama administrations. Those are memories of evil which can be removed from the world tonight. As people around the world say, the British stooge, Obama, was using you to die in a thermonuclear war globally. And as of tonight, if you will agree with us to throw this guy out of office and to restore Glass-Steagall immediately, we can make it. And nobody's going to really fight a thermonuclear war, because if the United States is not involved in the thermonuclear war, nobody has the ability to start it.
Our institutional question tonight, which I didn't get to ask in the beginning because of the up-to-the-minute reports from Washington, is regarding the British. Before I ask the question, though, I want to preface a little bit with something that you referred to earlier in the broadcast. You, on the subject of the British monarchy, you said this is a bit of a longer story, but you've referred to now both the British intention with regards to the Green policy and with regards to the war. And this became very clear this week in an article in the London Economist, which is it's the cover article regarding the situation in Ukraine. And it's almost as if the Economist wrote the script, which Obama read during his press conference this afternoon. They say in the article titled Putin's Inferno, they essentially make an open threat of war against Russia, saying the time has come for, quote, the West to stand up to Russia. Confronting a country that has lots of nuclear weapons is difficult, but it has to be done. Now, just remember, this is the same London Economist which back in 2007 spelled out the scenario of Obama threatening massive nuclear retaliation against Russia over precisely this kind of crisis which is now occurring in Ukraine. So in their book, the script for World War III has already been written, and it's as if Obama is reading his pre-designated lines. Now, what you said earlier is that you have to address the role of the British Empire, which invariably is what even the best commentators who are beginning to catch on to what the threat is, Paul Craig Roberts, others, tend to miss this element. They just pin it on Washington hegemony or something like this. Now, that was my little preface. What the question is from a contact based in Washington is as follows. Mr. LaRouche, recently, British Prime Minister David Cameron has threatened that Britain could withdraw from the European Union unless there are some long overdue reforms. The issue could soon be put to the British people in the form of a referendum on whether the British should formally leave the EU. You have been warning for many years that the European political landscape is dominated by oligarchical powers, centered in London and Amsterdam, but not exclusively Anglo-Dutch. How do you see the present European situation, particularly in light of your warnings about a thermonuclear confrontation centered on the recent and ongoing provocations against Russia in Ukraine and elsewhere?
Well, you have to look at two precedents. One was the Roman Empire. Now, the Roman Empire is based on a Zeus principle. That is, the assumption is that the human species is divided into two groups. One are the people who should be allowed to rule, a limited number of people. And the majority of people should be curbed in not allowed to know things, not allowed to have any technology to speak of, just to be virtual slaves, and to keep the population down. Now, for example, the Roman Empire conducted vast masses of killings, mass killings of Roman people and others, and that was the system. Then came along the British Empire. Now, the British Empire was somewhat complicated. It was a complicated process in the sense that you had a Dutch tyranny which took over the United Kingdom and so forth at the last part of the 17th century. And in the course of that was the time that the American settlement was crushed in Massachusetts. It was by the Dutch invasion, the Dutch wars. And that continued into the wars in the first quarter of the 18th century. And we had a great genius, Benjamin Franklin, who played a key part internationally in organizing the forces that made the victory of the American Revolution possible. At that point, the British, who we had defeated, because many nations in Europe, who feeling the oppression of the British Empire and hating it, joined in supporting the fight of the United States for its existence. But with the assassination of the designer of the economy of the United States, Alexander Hamilton, who was the great genius who did everything competent in designing an economic system for the United States. We had a bunch of people who were fools. They behaved foolishly after that. But then with President Monroe, John Monroe, and our great president, that we actually succeeded. Then you got a British agent, Aaron Burr, the man who assassinated the president, Alexander Hamilton, then came into power again as a British agent at financing Andrew Jackson and his companion, president. They destroyed the United States to a large degree. They did it under those, and they did it out of a British operation which is based on the British monarchy's financial interests, which is planted in the vicinity of New York City and the Boston people, who were still in crooks as hell, and still are today, I believe. So what happened is the United States had a setback. We had no decent presidents in the United States from Jackson until Lincoln. No president, except the ones that were assassinated in the meantime. Any good president in the meantime was assassinated. Lincoln was then assassinated. Who did it? The British Empire. They did it. It was done directly from London. Then we had Theodore Roosevelt as the president. Well, he was on the Confederate side. He was on the British side. His uncle, who trained him, was actually that. Then look at some of the crap presidents we had. We had a great president at the end of that century. Then we had Theodore Roosevelt, who was actually a scion of the Confederacy and the guy who was supposed to be assassinated for the crimes he had committed in the course of the Civil War. He was the president, Theodore Roosevelt, a typical British agent. Then you look through the things, you had one or two decent presidents. But then you had Woodrow Wilson. Woodrow Wilson was the fascist, and he was a fascist, who was part of the whole Confederacy system, and he reorganized the Ku Klux Klan from the White House. Woodrow Wilson. Then you had Harding, who died allegedly of eating oysters while riding on a train over the desert. Now we know why he was assassinated. Then we had two presidents in the course of the later part of the 20th century, after post-war. Hoover was a bum. We got, after Franklin Roosevelt died, we got a thug. No good. We had a great presidential president, Eisenhower, who'd been a great commander in war, a great hero in war, actually. But he was handicapped by the effect of what had happened with the FBI. The FBI was the thing that destroyed the ability of the presidency to act. Then you had our president, Kennedy, and Kennedy, for about 3 years before they assassinated him, He created with the greatest renovation of our policy in history in 3 years. He created the entire space program and many other programs which were essential. So they assassinated him. He was also an obstacle to getting the United States involved in a long war in Indochina of about 10 years. We lost 90,000 people, soldiers, in Indochina in a war that was not worth fighting in the first place. And MacArthur has said, don't do it. No land war on Asia for the United States. And he was right. He was right on more practically every other military question he ever considered. And see, this is what happened to us. Then you had, because George H.W. Bush was such a clown, although he had been vice president for two terms, he was such a clown in his own term that he became disgusting, and that's how Bill Clinton got elected for 2 terms. Then they framed up Bill Clinton with a stunt they created. And he went out in disgrace, and because of his disgrace, then you had this joker, George W. Bush Jr., who was the worst piece of crap. He had no function whatsoever really in the presidency for 2 terms. He was there for 2 terms, sitting, an idiot, a virtual idiot, for 2 terms. Then we get this joker, Obama. How did he get president? Well, he got the biggest drug bailout in world history, which came from London. He was not really a president. He was a British joker, sitting in as president. That's what we have been. And that's what we have to understand. The time has come that we in the United States, the fact that we probably are not now going to thermonuclear war. And if the United States does not participate in a thermonuclear war, the war is called off. Because the power in Eurasia is so great. And Europe is hopeless. Western and Central Europe are actually destroyed. Now, I'm all for the rebuilding of Europe. I think they have to decide to get rid of that European system, because that's destroying them. If the nations of Europe go back to being the nations of Europe, of continental Europe, and with our cooperation and the cooperation of others and the marketing, in other words, if the Asian market continues to grow as it is growing, then you're going to find that the reconstruction of Europe in terms of the nations of Europe, not some European concoction run out of London. So that's where we stand. And if we understand that and say we're going to cancel Wall Street, because remember, Wall Street has never earned its money. That is, it does not produce anything. It sits there and sucks on it like a parasite, like one of these water slugs that suck you in the water. It leeches. They're just leeches. And they never earned anything. If we put in Glass-Steagall and establish certain government measures to reestablish a true American banking system, we can create an American banking system through the agency of our government. We can create a true banking system on a dime. We know how to do it. We will have to keep a special federal credit system, not this Wall Street kind of money, but a federal system of credit where the federal government creates credit which is allocated on the basis of the projects which are necessary. In other words, if there's a project that is necessary, the federal government can be trusted to conduct a banking operation, a banking support operation. And thereby we can put the United States back to work. And we're going to have to start with some big projects, which are going to be water projects. We're going to have to build a major, we're going to have to do them all over. We're going to have to take the water that's going out of Alaska, fresh water, we're going to turn it back into the North American continent. And that way will be the key way in which we solve this problem of the water shortages. Because with a NWAPA system, we will have a system which can move water from various parts of locations and recycle the water within the United States. In that way, we'll be able to get our economy back together again. And we will also go into high technology, thermonuclear fusion. Thermonuclear fusion enhanced by helium-3 adaptations. That will give us a capability in nearby space beyond anything that anybody has dreamed of. Maybe I dream about these things. A few other people do. But most people have not even dreamed about what we can do with the aid of a helium-3 enrichment of a thermonuclear process. It's going to take some time to do that, but we'll get on the job quickly.
Well, let me ask a final question on what you brought up earlier as the end of war. President John F. Kennedy said during his presidency that the world has long since passed the time when armed conflict can be the solution to international problems. During the Berlin crisis, he said to the American people during a television address to the nation, "3 times in my lifetime, our country and Europe have been involved in major wars. In each case, serious misjudgments were made on both sides of the intentions of others, which brought about great devastation. Now, in the thermonuclear age, any misjudgment on either side about the intentions of the other could rain more devastation in several hours than has been wrought in all the wars of human history." Now, you recently wrote a paper called "The End of War or the End of Man," which you conclude by saying very similarly to what President Kennedy had said. You said, "Any war, such as that now being mustered on the between the transatlantic and Eurasian thermonuclear powers, would almost certainly mean the virtual extinction of the human species. An hour and a half of full-throttle conflict would mean either immediate extinction of the human species or a condition of continued life on Earth which could not be sustained for long. Such a war would be the greatest crime ever perpetuated against both man and also the will of the Creator. The implications of a thermonuclear warfare conducted between the respective transatlantic and Eurasian powers would be the greatest crime ever committed on Earth, a crime from which there could be no forgiveness, ever." And you issued a memo just earlier today, Lynn, where you come back to this point, and you stress that general warfare on this planet can no longer be an instrument of government. But you say that mere peace by itself, however necessary, is not sufficient. So, seeing as war has been, ever since the time of Zeus, a tool employed by a system of empire to control mankind, if we do succeed in averting the threat of an extermination war in the near term, what new system of relations between nations and between man in general do you envision to replace this oligarchical system that has plagued mankind for millennia?
Well, my wife has just come back to here from a trip to China. And it's quite a happy, very happy trip, and a very happy China in general. We have problems in Japan because we have one faction in Japan is very nasty and has some of the old, so we say the old sinful ways which they had before. And it's located, they're known who they are. There are other Japanese who have a different view of life. But China is now, you talk about 1.4 billion people. It's the biggest place in the world right now. Probably the greatest aggregation of buildings that you ever saw on this planet, and things like that. Magnificent. India is trying to go in a similar direction. The conflicts, the cultural conflicts within India itself and Pakistan, for example, and Indochina, some other things, are problematic. But if you look at the world as a whole, and you include Russia, China, India, and so forth, you have really and the United States, and the nations which in Europe, who are normal. Africa has been Africa has been actually, it's the British Empire. The British Empire has conducted a mass murder occupation of Africa. It's pure genocide. They're still killing black people, mass murdering them, and saying how nice they are to them, to allow some of them to live some of the time. So the fact is, we are in a situation where mankind can no longer play these silly games of warfare, of opportunist warfare. The British Empire has to be liquidated. And simply by freeing the African nations will be a big step in that direction. And so therefore we're in a situation where we have to and can, with the technologies available to us, if we use them, we're capable of changing the character of this planet. Not without great complications. There's some things that have to be done, but you don't need to really redesign the mind of man. We do have to redesign the mind of man somewhat by getting them to think better and improve their education, for example, things like that. But if we store the system of sovereign nation states, which was the natural intention of our creation of our United States. The United States was created under the influence of Nicholas Cusa, whose influence was sustained and inspired Columbus to go across the waters. He got a lecture on Cusa's methods in Portugal, and so therefore he became converted to this idea of crossing the great oceans. The idea of crossing the great oceans did not exist before then. It was Cusa's influence that got this thing going. So anyway, the nations of the world, as nations, going back to the fact that nations have a basis in cultural characteristics. So you want to preserve national sovereignties because you want the people themselves as a people to manage their own affairs. And you want consolidative relationships with other nations to keep the planet in order. Our mission now for the future of mankind lies in space. We are threatened by, all kinds of things, rocks and whatnot floating out there in the solar system. We don't understand the solar system very well. We're not sure exactly how the solar system and the galaxy function together. We know they function together. We know that the solar system is toddled along from place to place by the galaxy. We don't know exactly what the relationship is. We know there's a larger system which includes the galaxy within it. We don't know enough about it. But we are going to now, as we know, because we cannot get helium-3 in sufficient quantity on Earth directly. This whole solar system is run on helium-3. That's what the radiation of the sun is. Helium-3. That's the big item on the shelf, shall we say. So therefore, if we are able to enrich the use of thermonuclear fusion as a program, develop thermonuclear fusion, and include the advantage of including the helium-3 adaptation to that process, we are now beyond moon. We're not going to live on the moon. Mankind cannot live there. We're not going to inhabit Earth. We're not going to inhabit Mars. We may have some visits taken there. But we're going to have a higher rate of velocity to be able to move around within our neighborhood of the solar system. We are going to be able to take, great rocks, which are about to come out and kill people in the Earth, or even to knock out the entire population of Earth. Some of these things will do that. So we're going to be able to move those things. We have to be patient. It'll take a long time. You just start pushing, but you push them in a time advanced enough to push these rocks out of the way. Then you turn around and you say, well, we're not going to just leave them loose out there. We're going to mine them. There are a lot of minerals out there which we need on Earth and for projects we have in nearby space. We're going to mine those rocks. We're going to control them, those asteroids. We're going to learn how to deal with some comets, which are things a little bit mysterious. We don't know how to deal with those yet. So we on Earth, as Earthlings, are not going to be Earthlings anymore. We're going to be humanity reaching out to deal with the things in its immediate neighborhood, bringing some of these things which are dangerous under control, and also bringing into our reign, things that we need. So we will be managing a whole sector of the solar system. In the meantime, we have to worry about what's going to happen to the solar system. So therefore, we have before us a great number of tasks, some of which we know and some of which we do not yet know. But we know those kinds of tasks are out there. So mankind has a new destiny. A destiny on Earth, but also beyond Earth. We can develop the devices. We will be able to develop the devices with the technologies now coming before us to begin to reach out and embrace areas of the solar system around us. We can reach as far as Mars. We can try to build up something on Mars which may be an automatic system. There may be some vestige of life on Mars. We don't know yet. But we'll look for it. But it's mankind is the issue. We as mankind, as far as we know, are unique. We have a special mission. There's nothing like us, known to us, in the solar system, or even beyond. So therefore, we have a human mission. We are no longer earthlings, no longer confined to a prison called Earth. We are now people who, with education and technology, we can pioneer. We can do things to make our part of the solar system more convenient for us, and more convenient for any passing stranger that happens to come by.
With that, I will bring a conclusion to tonight's broadcast. I'd like to thank Michael Steagall for joining us tonight, and you can expect to hear much more from him as his campaign continues. And thank you very much, Lynn, for what you've done. So thank you for tuning in. That's a conclusion, and please stay tuned to LaRouchePAC.com. Good night.